All right. Looks like I'm live. I'm going to just make some adjustments, but I'm basically coming to you from my comic Tropes set this time. Hello, everybody. Let me see here. So, I was trying to do a live stream drawing, and unfortunately, I just could not figure out OBS properly. That's the camera. Okay. Hey. So, let me just take a moment to get set up. I've got my Surface here, so I'm going to open up the chat window. Let's see what I got here. Just going to take me a moment. As soon as I open this, I can see what y'all are saying, and yeah, we can at least have a conversation. Yeah, we can at least have a conversation. Thanks for bearing with me as I get set up. I'll have to turn this audio down. Okay. Is anybody even here? To be decided. I've got some lag going on with my Surface, so I'm not sure if anyone's even here. If I look at my iPhone, which is what I'm using to stream, it looks like there are a few people. Okay, I'm seeing Buona Beast. Hello. Hello. I had a drink. Where's my drink? Excuse me. Today is my one day off, so I thought I was going to be able to dedicate a little bit of time to talking to all of you and drawing. And unfortunately, I just cannot figure out how to get the audio to work on OBS. So right now, that's my issue. Trying to get that resolved before Inktober begins. Wish me luck. Let's see. Okay. Stream status is working. Only a few people in here, that's okay, but yeah, I'm basically here to answer any questions you guys might have. Audio is working for me, I can hear you loud and clear. The phone worked well with your vacation. Yeah, both good points. Thanks, Winged Clover. Glad that you guys can hear me right now. And Buona Beast, the phone does work okay to stream with. Obviously, that's what I'm using right now. But that's only one input source. And when I'm drawing, I like to have a webcam focused on the artwork and then another camera focused on me. To use that, you use a program called OBS that can manage multiple sources. And for some reason, the computer just isn't picking up any audio. My fiance and I have been struggling with every setting we can think of and looking at every troubleshooting guide. We're just having trouble getting it to work. Milosh is here, says, is it Inktober already? Not quite, but I'm trying to get ready a few days ahead. I want to make sure I've got my streaming software set up. It's a different computer than I had last year. So I'd like to do that. I'd like to do Inktober again. It'll be a challenge for sure. Inktober, you basically just commit to drawing every day of October. And I'll probably only have about an hour a day to devote to something like that. So I might not really always be able to finish the drawing that I'm working on, but at least it's an hour of time to really focus and work and try to improve, as well as an hour to connect with all of you, answer any questions that I might see. So I think that will be productive. I'm currently working a job where I very frequently work until at least 9 p.m. and that's 9 p.m. Pacific time. That means I won't be home and ready to stream until possibly as late as 10 p.m. So it's going to be pretty late. I don't expect I'll necessarily have a ton of viewers, especially as the days go on and people are like, oh, I've seen a couple live streams, maybe I don't want to see anymore, or maybe I've had my question answered. But it's primarily for me, it's an exercise to flex my creative muscles and try to draw better. Wow, okay, we've got somebody here from Trinidad and Tobago. Beautiful, beautiful set of island islands that make up a country. Yeah, anyway, wonderful. That's Kukamaya. Hello. Stop watching YouTube. That's a great name. Says, I have some work to do, but man, do I love you and your videos. Please keep it up. Love you. Well, I appreciate the support. Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. Buana Beast says, I know you want to wait for more people, but can't wait to see the views people have on Captain Marvel. Do you mean the upcoming MCU movie? You probably mean that. I think it looks fine. Yeah, the preview excited me about as much as I've been excited for, you know, Ant-Man or Doctor Strange or something like that, which is to say fairly excited, but it isn't like as excited as I was for something like Spider-Man or Captain America, just because I'm a little bit more passionate about those characters. But I also was only like average excited for the original Guardians of the Galaxy, and I ended up loving that movie. So the MCU definitely usually at least meets my expectations, and every once in a while they exceed them. Hey Chrissy, Twin Island Republic, says Kukumaya, the Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, yes, that's awesome. So not too many people here. Feel free to ask any questions. You know, if it's kind of light and there aren't too many people, I will. I'll not stay long. If more people join, then I'll, you know, just stay as long as people have questions. But today's my day off, like I was saying, so I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking to you. I was hoping to spend some time live streaming drawing, but I'll just divide that. I'll talk to you in this live stream, and then I'll probably do some drawing on my own time. I can't set up the audio, but whatever. I'll just do that on my own time. Let's see. Milos doesn't have any interest in the Captain Marvel movie. That's fair. It's, you know, Hankification. Good evening. Hello. Okay, a bunch of emoji faces from Buana Beast. Let's see. How do you get yourself mirror flipped? Am I mirror flipped? Oh. It's because I'm using my phone. I didn't even realize that it mirror flipped me. Hey everybody, this is what it looks like when I part my hair on that side. Don't think I've got a way to flip that. I think that the phone just does what the phone wants to do. That's interesting. No, you know what? There might be a way. I'm trying to think of if I use the other side of the camera, does it reverse back to normal? Is that how it works? It's because I'm using it on like the selfie side. Let me see what happens if I do that. Give me a sec here. That could be interesting. So, I'm gonna bear with me. Taking this out of its cradle. Okay. I know this sounds weird. It's a little awkward, but it's not too bad. Come on, come on. Can't get it in there. There. Okay. Am I still streaming? How's that look? Yeah. I think I've fixed it. I think I'm now looking normal. So let's just try to rotate this over just a little like that. I'll just look at this camera. And yeah, there we go. All right. So this is my comic Tropes set, and you're pulled back a little further than usual so you can see what it is. The old stickers on the wall that I used to have, a green screen behind my usual backdrop, and then I've got this sort of backdrop, which is just some plywood pages that I can like essentially rotate, but I've never really found a good way to take advantage of that. Anyway, let's see. Okay, some folks in here. Hello, Test Echo. Hello, Melody and Papa Bear. Yeah, so now I'm not flipped. Now you're reading left to right. Aces. Where'd my drink go? Over there. Hey. Any questions? Okay. What do you do for a living, if you don't mind me asking? No, I don't mind. These days, my new job, which I guess I've been at for like 3 months now, is I sell used cars. I work at a place called CarMax. I sell used cars. The audio is lower after flipping. Well, I'll just have to speak up. I don't know. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. The input on the audio is on the other side of the phone, so that does make sense. This isn't my preferred way to live stream. Usually, I've got a dedicated like mic, and then a webcam, and then a camera that's focused on the artwork. and just couldn't get that working tonight. Hello, Jane Muse. Hello, Atomicus Video. Folks, feel free to ask questions. I'm just hanging out. Wanted to do some drawing. Couldn't quite get my setup working there, so I'm just live streaming from my phone. Just thought I'd take some questions and say hello. But yeah, so I'm working at CarMax, and honestly, it's a great group of coworkers. I'm not going to talk about any specifics there, just because, you know, I think you're allowed to tell people where you work, and they don't really ask us to keep anything private. But I come from a background where I've worked for like healthcare systems and life insurance companies, and you know, personal information I value. So I'm not going to, like, you know, get too into detail on like either coworkers or customers that I've dealt with. I might have some stories in broad detail, but that's about it. Hi, Miss Mirrored Dimension Chris. He had more edge. Yeah, I did. And I also had a darker goatee. But, you know, this is what you get. What will you do for Inktober? Great question, Atomicus. My current plan is to live stream as soon as I get home from work each day. Probably can only commit about an hour because I don't have a lot of free time at the end of the day. So, you know, I'll just basically do as much as I can within that hour. There are some Inktober writing prompts. I haven't really had much opportunity to study them yet, but that's just as well. I think that the idea of Inktober is all about improvement, and in a way it's about just forcing yourself to sit down and draw and hopefully improve, as compared to just plan out a drawing and keep working and working and working on it and you know, make that look as cool as possible. It's trying to really work on your fundamentals. So for me, that would just be trying to get my figure work to loosen up a little bit, to just sort of add some energy. Hi. Give me a sec here. Putting this camera into a tripod. Okay. Is that... Hello. Hello. I'm back. Back again. Tell a friend. Wow. Hi. So, that was terrible. I had my phone plugged into my computer. Computer wasn't giving it enough power. The phone died. I've now got the phone plugged into an electrical outlet. Professional, eh? Hello, Diablo Hashcraft. Yes, I'm plugged into the source wall. Oh, hi! You caught me just getting hammered on a Friday night and reading comics. I promise I'm not getting hammered, and I'm not even reading. I'm talking to you. Okay, I'm reading a little. I'm reading your comments, so that counts. Let's see. Ellis Strieger, hello. Supporter on Patreon. My new theory is that aliens have finally come to take Chris back. I'm not sure what alien race he belongs to, though. You figured me out. I must go back to my home planet. Bye! No. Let's see. Rob Zombie. Not the real Rob Zombie. This is XYZ Rob Zombie. Says, hi. Just wanted to say I'm learning a lot from you, and I really like your channel. Well, I appreciate that. That's just really nice. Honestly, doing this channel teaches me as well. A lot of this stuff I do have just banging around up here, but when I sit down to write the script for an episode, I do engage in additional research, pull up like some old comics at the comic book store frequently, just so that you know, see if there's any sort of angle that I'm missing, or you know, just a piece of trivia that I don't know. So I do learn myself. It's fun. Let's see. I am leaning towards Kree. I'm not Kree. Kree are blue, or in the comics pink, but I think I'm pretty sure in the MCU they're either blue or black. Because what was the character in the Guardians of the Galaxy movie? Was it like Korvath or something? The one that Digimon Hansu plays. Anyway, actually, the Planet Wholesome. Gee, thank you. Thoughts on Bowserette? Not sure I know what that is. Sounds like a drawing of Princess Peach in Bowser's clothes. That's just a guess. Who do you think should play Alex Murphy in the new RoboCop? Another reboot of RoboCop? I haven't heard anything about this. I hope that's not true. The last reboot stunk. The original RoboCop is a fantastic movie. Excellent satire, brilliant structure, awesome robot suit. I didn't like the remake at all. Sunday comics have a rich history. They absolutely do. Great point, Rob Zombie. I guess I haven't really gotten too in-depth in Sunday comics, but that's definitely something that is sort of like, you know, swirling around in my head that I probably will address at some point. Some of the early popular Sunday comics, because that's where comic books evolved from, obviously, reprints of that stuff. Christopher A says nobody should play Murphy. Well, that's true. Miller says close. This is for Bowserette. It's Bowser made to look like Princess Peach. What's the difference? I guess the difference is like the face is like green and scaly. I don't know. Am I into Takusatsu? I don't know what that is, Blackjack, so probably not. I'll have to Google that. Don't know if that's something dirty. Don't know if that's something cool. I really don't know what that is yet. So I don't think I'm into it. Okay. Hankification is saying that the RoboCop remake would be written by the original guy and directed by Neil Blomkamp. Yeah, I mean, I agree that that's a good creative team potentially, but RoboCop's story has been told perfectly once. I just don't see the need to remake it. I don't know what you'd add to it in terms of a modern day take. I'm not against remakes in general. Like, if you have a good idea for a remake that makes it relevant to today, yeah, sometimes that can work. But I don't, like, the original RoboCop stands, it's still very, very good. TARDIS Rider suggests if I talk about old Sunday comics to talk about E.C. Seeger's Popeye. Definitely would. Yeah, it's actually a pretty funny, weird comic. I think that the cartoon, a lot of us grew up with reruns of that, and that was sort of more the Popeye that we knew, which is not an inaccurate take on Popeye, but the comic strip was maybe a little rougher around the edges, and I would argue like funnier. I remember actually the first time I ever met my fiance, it was not a date. We just were both going in a group of comic book enthusiasts to the comic book museum, or the Museum of Comic Book History. I'm not sure what it's called. It's in Baltimore. And they had original Popeye pages in frames. It was really cool to see stuff like that from the 30s. Let's see. I missed a bunch of stuff. Heroic Nerd TV says Bowsette is a trans character. Bowser is turned into a woman when he eats a pink mushroom. It's a big meme right now. Okay, well, that doesn't sound bad, I guess. Whatever floats people's boat. Politics have been in comics for a long time, says Buona Beast. Remember when the Joker was the UN ambassador for Iran? I remember that. That was in Death in the Family. Great story. Jim Aparo art. Yeah, that was a good comic. But it dates back further than that. Comics have always been political. The early Superman comics were all about him dealing with the social issues of the day. And then, like, as soon as World War II came around, you know, all of the comics touched on that. Politics have always been ingrained in comics history. Because, I mean, the writers want it to be about something, not just mindless action scenes. It might seem like some of that on the surface level, but all the comics that have stuck around have always dealt with, like, the social issues of its day and stayed relevant by continuing to address them. Yeah, let's see. On that note, do I know any queer comics? Oh, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure that I do. XYZ Rob Zombie, do I know any good queer comics? I mean, there was that Love is Love anthology fairly recently, and that, like, had a lot of really good stuff. Cena Grace has done both some funny comics and his writing on Iceman, a lot of people really enjoyed that. He worked for a long time as an editor with Robert Kirkman on all of his titles, so he's like a really talented guy that has written some gay characters. I'm trying to think of like what a good, I don't know. I mean, I can think of plenty of stories with gay characters or trans characters, etc. in them, but yeah, I guess I don't think I'd be the best person to ask about what good queer comics are. Am I looking forward to the Netflix Dredd series? Sounds like Carl Urban may reprise the title role. If he reprises the title role, I'm absolutely in. I love Judge Dredd. I think Netflix could do it well. It really all depends on their take and who they get to work both behind the scenes and who plays Dredd. But I could definitely be interested. Oh, Diablo Hashcraft points out Exit Stage Left Snagglepuss was amazing. And you know what? I did read that. That was a fascinating take on like Snagglepuss, like in, was it 1950s or 1960s? I think it was, yeah, it was 1950s, and he was like a gay playwright. That was the take on the recent comic. And that's both like funny and interesting to look at from like, that was the time when a lot of people were getting attacked both in comics and in film and stuff like that for potentially being communist or at least not American. So that's pretty cool. Have I seen or read, what was it? Like something about, oh shoot, I missed it. TARDIS Writer recommends Howard Cruz as a talented historical queer artist. So, okay, I'll note that. Lurquian, hope I got that right, my friend, says, have I seen or read Attack on Titan? I've seen like the first episode of Attack on Titan. Seemed alright. Flipped through the comic. I liked the idea behind it. I didn't love the art on the manga, so I haven't actually read that yet. But if I hear that like it's an amazing story and it concludes well, then that's something I'd potentially read. I like the premise of it. And some of the gachapons that I give away when I have fan art, a couple of those are Attack on Titan gachapons. Why do we call them comics? Because the original comics, Morgan Blank, were reprints of the Sunday funnies. Like a lot of the comics that were originally printed were comical. They were funny, so comics just stuck. If they were 32 frames per panel, would they be movies? Only if you lined them all up and you could flip through it. Can you do a review? There's a Sweet Lime Juice. Can I do a review of Jack Kirby's Elemental run since the film is becoming relevant? Yeah, I probably will. I actually probably will cover Elementals specifically. Eternals, actually. You say Elementals, but it's Eternals. Yes, I actually have something to say about that, and it would sort of piggyback on the Inhumans review I did about Jack Kirby. So I actually would sort of do a type of sequel for that at some point. Do I keep up with One Piece? I'm not up to date with it. I know the general idea up through like a few months ago, and I've read the first few years worth, but I'm not up to date. Ever thought of doing a comic tropes video, says Jamie's. No, that's probably a little too meta. I don't think enough people would be interested. And honestly, these live streams are sort of talking about the show or talking about me, so that's probably about as close as I'll get to a comic tropes. Let's see. Philip Flores, any recommendations on any superhero titles I should be reading now? Philip, I'm not always the best one to ask about what's good right now because I don't buy comics every week these days. I kind of wait, hear reviews, hear what people are talking about, and then I'll pick it up in like trade paperback form usually. And some of the stuff that I'm reading these days isn't necessarily superheroes specifically. Like I like a lot of the stuff Rick Remender's doing, like Deadly Class. I thought the new issue Border Town through Vertigo was pretty cool. The only real superhero stuff I've read recently would be, I think it's on my rack here somewhere. Yeah, I read Batman White Knight, and I thought that was really good. I'm a big fan of Sean Gordon Murphy. I think he's a great artist. I've also been reading, and this wrapped up, but Kill or Be Killed. Not really superheroes either. I tend to enjoy nonfiction comics, crime comics. I still like sci-fi and action adventure, and I have a lot of love and passion for various superheroes. I just don't read them on a monthly basis. I kind of wait until it's finished. The last thing I read might have been something like the Superior Spider-Man arc by Dan Slott, and I really like that personally. Anyway, what's the background music on Comic Tropes? It's just like it was created for the show, so it doesn't really have a name. Where the heck is Infotron, asks XYZ Rob Zombie. The reason I don't use Infotron too regularly is I was told there's another comic book review show out there that also has sort of a retro 50s style robot, and they have a lot more viewers than I do. I'm pretty sure the name of that is Comic Book Girl, or at least something close to that, so you guys probably know what I'm talking about. And I don't want to do anything that feels like I'm ripping off somebody else's idea. So I don't know who did it first. I never went that far, but I just sort of figure if somebody has more views, it almost doesn't matter. Like whether I did it after her or whether I did it before her, if somebody else has more views and then I'm doing the same thing, people could accuse me of ripping something off. So that's why I don't really use them unless I've got like a very specific little joke. Let's see, Comic Book Girl 19. Several people say that. Can I give a shout out to your friend Holden? Hey Holden, hope that works. She did it a long time ago. So does that mean she doesn't use the robot anymore? I think I've said this a couple times before. I specifically don't watch other comic book review or discussion shows on YouTube. I don't want to be influenced by what other people are doing, intentionally or unintentionally. So I actually just don't watch any of it. I'm very curious. If I ever stopped doing my show, I'd probably binge a lot of it, but I intentionally don't watch that stuff. TARDIS Rider says, very jealous of your spinner rack. I love my spinner rack. I always wanted a spinner rack. My friend Jim Demonakis ran a Kickstarter, and I supported it right away because it was definitely a little cheaper than buying like a used one or anything like that. Let's see. Infotron looks a bit like the robot internet comment etiquettes robot. Not quite sure what that is, Milos. Sorry. Let's see. Chris, you once spoke on your grandfather. He was some sort of computer scientist. He was at one point. I didn't realize I had talked about that. Yeah, my mother's father. He was smart. He was a nuclear physicist. He had his PhD, so technically he was a doctor. He held a lot of different jobs, but one of them was actually working on UNIVAC, the first computer. Another was he worked on the Manhattan Project, and whatever he did on that, he would never tell us. But we do know that he worked on it. And there are like one or two small patents in his name, but they are for whatever companies he worked for. So he was a smart guy. Talking about Scott McCloud would be a meta episode. That's true. Scott McCloud's done all those books on like how comics work, what they are. That would be interesting. I wonder if I should, I don't know what I could really say about it other than it's worth reading if you want to make comics. His books, Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. I don't know what I'd say though in terms of commentary. I just say like, yes, this is a good read. Makes sense. Yeah, Edward Lightbringer says, spinner racks were offered in previews recently at over $300. This was under $300, so this one. Let's see. Batman Damned was good. This is Wannabe saying this. It's not what people are making it. It needs a good book too. Otherwise, let's just buy the art. Yeah, I believe the art's by Lee Bermejo. I'm not 100% sure how to say his name, but talented artist for sure. Have I ever been to Detroit? No, I've never been to Detroit. I would go to Detroit if there was like maybe a Comic-Con or something like that there. I would consider going to Detroit. I've got a good friend Marcel who's from Detroit, and there's definitely been some interesting movies set in Detroit besides RoboCop. I really love the horror movie It Follows. That was in Detroit. Have you ever made a comic yourself? I'd want to read it. I have. I think it's something you almost have to do if you want to analyze and discuss them. It doesn't mean that you've had to be successful at it, but I think that like making comics, working on every single aspect of them gives you just an informed opinion, maybe. It doesn't mean you've got the right opinion, but at least it's informed. I've done a lot of small press stuff. I've done a lot of self-published stuff, anthologies, superhero comics, and I've done work for hire for like educational comics. So I've worked in several, like nothing big, nothing that like, you know, Marvel or DC. No, probably the stuff that's been seen the most would just be pinups in like some of Kirkman's books, like I think Super Patriot and Invincible. Those have probably been seen at least, but then forgotten because who remembers the fan art in the back of comics. But I've done some professional stuff. Gwen Stacy or Mary Jane Watson? I always liked Mary Jane Watson a little bit more. I thought Gwen Stacy was interesting enough as like sort of a first serious girlfriend and seemed to be a good fit for Peter because she was also smart. But Mary Jane, like when she's well written, has always sort of had her own goals and drives, and they just happen to really care for each other, and I kind of like that. Yeah, Mary Jane. Let's see. Did you do the T&D Whiz Kids? I did one of them. Let's see. I happen to have it here. There is an episode where I review Superman. Oh no, I didn't review this one. Oh, that's interesting. I guess I've got one that I didn't review. I've got another one somewhere here, I think. It's Superman and Wonder Woman against Lex Luthor. I don't know where I put that one. Oh, that's funny. I guess I've got another. So, in the, I believe it was I think this was the early 80s. I'm pretty sure this was like around 81 or 82. RadioShack was quite successful at the time, and they had their own line of personal computers, Tandy, and they made these comics with DC, and they'd be these two white kids that would just help Superman on all sorts of adventures with their home computer, which is definitely a bit of a stretch. So I reviewed at least one of those, but not this one. I didn't realize I had another one. Okay, I missed some questions. Let's see. Favorite Star Wars film? Empire Strikes Back, no question. What about Carrington, North Dakota? Have you ever been here? Sorry, L.S. Grieger, I have not been to North Dakota yet. I would love to visit every single state. I think I counted up once, and I've been to over 30, so there's still quite a few to hit. Wannabe says, I have only watched Spider-Man movies and cartoon, a few comics, and I say Stacy over MJ. Hey, that's fine. I mean, there can be good stories either way. Atomicus asks, did I like the Captain Marvel trailer? Yup, definitely. Mr. Yuck says that he is, well, I think it's a he because it says Mr. Yuck. He is a feminist. Okay. So I think that I'm caught up. Is that right? I caught up. I caught up on all the questions. That means I get a drink. Some people definitely don't like that I have drinks on camera. I don't know what to say. I don't feel like I actually get sloppy drunk. I've never driven drunk, so I'm gonna have a drink while I'm just sitting here talking to people or talking about comics. I think that's okay. Philip Flores just says superhero movies? ? Yes. Todd McFarlane or Rob Liefeld? Todd McFarlane. Will I do a comic tropes on Dwayne McDuffie or... Whoops, this is going too fast. Dwayne McDuffie or Eric Larson? Definitely Eric Larson. Dwayne McDuffie, I would like to talk about him. Yeah, I'd have to think of an angle. Brie Larson has this one wooden expression that's literally on her face majority of the time, and she looks like a tired soccer mom. Wow, that's your take, Milos. I've seen her in a lot of good films. I think she's capable of a lot of range, actually. I don't think she has just one expression. Did I read all the comics behind you, asks, let's see, Mauricio Farfan. I didn't, because I just realized that I have this Superman comic from RadioShack that I didn't read. I thought I'd read it. I think I've read all these others. Wait, no, I haven't read Strange Sports Stories yet. I've got other weird comics that I keep meaning to pull out and put on my spinner rack. This one says, what was the sinister secret of the goalie who wore a hockey mask of death? And how can a sheriff ski across space to get his man? Answer, he can't. Anyway, yeah, DC made Strange Sports in the 60s. So I haven't read that one either. Hankification said, I thought the trailer was boring, but the movie will probably be good. Yep, probably. Did you say anything about Superman Annual number 11 with Black Mercy? The one by Alan Moore? What do you get for the Man of Tomorrow or something? Wait, no. What do you get for the man who has everything? What was that called? I've never done a review. I've read it. It's a great story. It's classic. Favorite comic superhero DC in Marvel? Not quite sure what you mean by that, Dajwan. Favorite comic book superhero DC in Marvel? What do you think of digital comics? I think it's fantastic. I think it proves that no matter what happens to the print industry, the idea of comics will always stay around. People are now able to make their own comics, sell them online. So I would just say that they need to find a way to make them cheaper, and maybe that's simply releasing it later than the street date of print comics. I understand that you can't necessarily do just a cheaper version on the same day as the print, but I think it probably is the way that comics will go more likely in the future, and like at least for like smaller single stories and issues, and then they'll probably always print trade paperbacks and collections. What do you get for the man who has everything? Okay, I was right. Most underrated Bendis comic run on the Avengers. I don't know what that means. Like, did he have more than one run on the Avengers? I thought that he just sort of went from title to title, like Avengers, Mighty Avengers. Is that what you mean? I don't know. Or maybe it wasn't meant to be a question mark. Maybe you're just saying that Bendis' run was underrated. Okay, Dajwan says, your favorite DC superhero in favorite Marvel superhero. I don't know what that means. DC superhero in Marvel superhero? I don't know what that means. Okay, Christopher A. agrees that digital comics should be cheaper. Did I ever read any Ultraverse titles from the 90s? Yeah, L.S. Grieger, I did. I liked Prime, which was actually co-created and written and illustrated by Norm Brayfogle, who passed away just a couple days ago. He was a good artist. He drew Batman for like 6 years straight. He did like 4 years on Detective Comics, and then like 2 years on Batman, and then another year on Batman Shadow of the Bat. And he co-created a lot of interesting Batman villains. Jeremiah Arkham, Anarchy, Ventriloquist, and Scarface, Ratcatcher. I liked his art on Batman quite a bit. He was good, and I liked his work on Prime. He had a stroke like 4 years ago, and he wasn't able to draw professionally anymore, so kind of sad, but he was really good. There was a bunch of good stuff in the Ultraverse, at least artistically. I mean, they had George Perez as well. It kind of, it had like one strong year, and then it kind of quickly went downhill, to be honest. That's my take on it. Chris's favorite Marvel superhero is NFL Super Pro. Maybe so. James says, I meant, what's the most slept on Marvel comic book run that Bendis wrote? Oh, the most slept on one. Well, I mean, I guess everybody really remembers him for his long runs on both Avengers and Ultimate Spider-Man, so I would just say Daredevil, like where he started. Daredevil was pretty solid. Daredevil was good, so probably that. Well, no, you know, do people think of him like as the co-creator of Alias and Jessica Jones? I don't know. Because the original Alias comics were like some really good sort of crime fiction, like with some good mysteries, actually. So maybe the most slept on one, I'd say Alias after all. Did I ever read the Valiant comics in the 90s? Seems like you're not the biggest fan of Jim Shooter. I did read the Valiant comics in the 90s. I'm also probably not the biggest fan of Jim Shooter, but that's more of like a retroactive look back. Like, I didn't really know about Jim Shooter when I was reading his comics in the 80s and 90s, so it didn't really influence my opinion too much on him. Yeah, there was a lot of Valiant stuff that I enjoyed. Trying to think. Trying to think of like what stands out as like the most memorable. I mean, I read a lot of it though, like Ninjak and Exo Manowar, Magnus Robot Fighter. I liked Dr. Solar. Yeah, I read all of them. It's interesting that they sort of are now sort of blending together, and I'm not really remembering my favorite Valiant stuff. I remember thinking Shadow Man was pretty lame. He was always like drawn like playing his saxophone by the moonlight, and it's like, all right, dude. He just felt like an edgelord. Yep, Grieger agrees that Prime was kind of like a new take on Captain Marvel, and he also liked Rune and Sludge. Those were interesting. Rune ended up getting involved in like stealing at least one of the Infinity Gems or the Infinity Gauntlet. I can't even remember right now, but like Marvel had bought Malibu Comics, so they tried to take over the Ultraverse and interconnect it. I remember that they sent Black Knight from the Avengers and Juggernaut over to the Ultraverse, where they were gonna like beef up people's interest in the Ultraverse, which like the interest was starting to flag at that point. But it's like, I don't think anybody is that excited about either Black Knight or Juggernaut as being members of a superhero team. It's like they're Juggernaut is better as a villain, and Black Knight has always been kind of C-level at best. Does anyone know how Sportsmaster came to be? Is it through a sports comic? I don't know Sportsmaster. Somebody else will have to tell me. Batman carpet bombed Worf in his Batplane. It happened in a $250 million feature film. Okay, don't know what that means. Did I ever read Dark Horse's X? No, Melody and Papa Bear. I didn't read that one. I remember the covers. I remember the costume was kind of cool. You know, black, red X's, red tattered cape, and he only, I think, had one eye exposed in his mask. Yeah. I remember that was a cool design, but I didn't read it. Oh, that's right. L.S. Grieger is reminding me of, you know, like the Valiant comics he remembers, which I mentioned Exo Manowar and Turok, but I'd forgotten about Time Walker and Archer and Armstrong. Archer and Armstrong was pretty good. Blackjack asks if I ever watched Darkwing Duck and Gargoyles. No. By that point, I was like not really watching cartoons. I was probably in college or something when those came out. I don't remember the exact year. Are we allowed to ask personal questions? You can ask, Zodiac, but I won't promise to answer. Sportsmaster is somebody from Young Justice. Okay. Who's my favorite superhero? Probably Spider-Man. I like, I don't know, I just always sort of related to him having like the stress of real life and just feeling a lot of responsibility to help and make things better. Are you excited for the Venom movie? I wouldn't say excited. I'm curious. I'll probably watch it. I wouldn't say I'm excited for it. I don't see much to be excited for yet. But I do like Tom Hardy as an actor, so I'll probably see it. How are things with your fiance doing? Okay, yeah, that is a personal question, but they're great. Thank you. Like we're fantastic. We've never really had a bad time. That's why we're together. Whoops, I missed a bunch of stuff. Any predictions on Grant Morrison doing Green Lantern? It'll probably be good. Probably. We'll see. How am I doing today? I'm doing fine, Richard. How are you? I don't think I can idolize Batman after watching him kick another guy with a grenade and the grenade explodes. Well, the only thing to note about that, Heroic Nerd TV, is you start to realize that these characters aren't always the same character. By that I mean, like, There's a Spider-Man that's been written by Stan Lee. There's a Spider-Man that's been written by Brian Michael Bendis. There's a Stan Lee that's been written by, I don't know, J. Michael Straczynski, right? I'm just saying that there's like, yes, it shares a continuity, but every writer has their own take on these superheroes. So if you see a superhero do something that you're like, that was a lame story and that like ruined it, it shouldn't really ruin the character for you. That's just a story by a writer that you didn't like. At least that's my take on things. Boris or Frazetta? Frank Frazetta. Frank Frazetta for sure. Have I ever tried Crystal Skull vodka? Yeah, I've tried it. It is pretty good. It's expensive for what it is. But it's pretty good. Speaking of celebrity alcohols, I just had a gin and tonic, and it was Aviator Gin, which apparently is Ryan Reynolds' brand. Ryan Reynolds has an interest in Aviator. I did not know that until I got this, but yeah, Deadpool has his own gin. Let's see. How about a Tropes on the Buscema brothers? Definitely at some point. At least John Buscema, and probably I'd have stuff to say about Sal as well. Thoughts on Comicsgate? I'm not going to get into that. There's enough people talking about that stuff online. I don't think anything I'd have to say would really improve anything. I'd rather just focus on comic book reviews, and people can either like them or not, hate me or like me, whatever. Any good restaurant recommendations in the Seattle area? That's a really good question, Philip. Let me think. Do I have a favorite restaurant around here? I'm not sure I've developed a favorite restaurant in the area. I'm trying to think. I don't think I know. I don't think I've found a favorite restaurant. I'm always kind of looking for a good restaurant, but I'm bad at remembering names in general. So maybe I do know a good restaurant and the name just isn't coming to me right now. If I think of one later, I'll bring it up. Great question. I'd have to sit down and think and talk to like my fiance or a friend or something. Okay, I missed some things. Hey, Hooded Cobra Commander 788 here. If you are curious about reviews of vintage G.I. Joe figures, Hooded Cobra Commander 788 has a tremendously entertaining channel where he gives all sorts of really in-depth analysis of each figure and vehicle. It's great. And he says that he's watching while editing. I hope that the edit goes well. I'm very excited, to see what you do in October. I told him I would draw him a title card in October, so that's probably one day of Inktober. I'll probably sit down and draw something for Hoodie Coco. Okay, Zodiac Killer says, of all the places you've traveled to, which place had the greatest assortment of comic wonders? That's a great question. Several places leap to mind. Tokyo loves and respects its comic book creators. That said, there's tons of Japanese comics, and while they do carry some American comics, it's definitely not as popular. But there's comics everywhere and comic adaptation stuff everywhere, so that's pretty cool. I would also say that for some reason, Portland, Oregon has an incredibly dense concentration of comic book stores. Tons of comic book stores, tons of them, and a lot of them are fantastic. And of course, New York has some great comic book stores as well. I like Midtown Comics quite a bit. You can find pretty much anything there. I used to love Meltdown Comics in LA, but it's not around anymore, so that's kind of a bummer. Did I read Cerebus? Any interest in doing a show on it? Asks Jojo. Yeah, great question. Definitely we'll talk about it at some point. I have read it. I wouldn't say I'm a big fan. At the same time, it definitely has an important place in terms of what it accomplished within comics and the doors that it opened for other people. So there's a lot to say about Cerebus and its creator, Dave Sims. So yeah, I'll definitely be doing an episode on him at some point. It's definitely something I've always intended to do a big episode about. Welcome, Random Artiste. Thank you for joining. Do I read manga or watch anime? I read a little, not a lot. I read what am I reading these days? I read anything by Naoki Urasawa. So these days, what's getting translated? I think just Master Keaton, which is okay. It's not my favorite of his works, but it is good. And I read My Hero Academia. I think I have the free comic book day comic book size colored version that Viz put out here. But I love My Hero Academia. That reminds me of New Mutants in the 80s. Favorite webcomics. You know what? I'm not really reading any webcomics these days. I'm definitely looking for good recommendations. So if anybody has a good webcomic that they want to mention it. Am I going to talk about Mike Allred? Absolutely. Did I do a Comic Tropes episode on Frank Miller? Yep, early on. Probably could do with like a better take on it. Like, you know, my early episodes I have trouble watching. Well, I really don't rewatch them, but I sort of remember what I did, and I'm like, hadn't really developed into the show that it became. Ryan Tan Sanchez says, any chance for an R. Crumb review? Definitely at some point. And that'll be a challenging one because Crumb did a lot of important stuff in comics, and yet I don't think everything he did aged well. But I do think he's talented, and I think he broke a lot of barriers and created a lot of new stuff. So there's definitely stuff to talk about there. Do you think Marvel or DC could pull off something like Shonen Jump? I do, Sigamigs. I think that anthologies are a harder sell here, but I do think that the value would work. I think that the question is just getting it out kind of everywhere. If you're going to do something like that, a big anthology with all your superheroes, I think distribution is key. DC right now has its 100-page giant that are in Walmarts, but that's not enough. It needs to be in grocery stores and gas stations and stuff like that. Thoughts on Bill Watterson? One of my patrons asked me to cover him, so I'll probably do an episode about him at some point. Why don't I do interviews with creators? I'd love to, but I would want to do it in person, and obviously, comic book creators are all over the world, so that's a challenge. I think if my channel became a lot bigger, if I could do it, for instance, for a living, I would travel around and interview creators. That would become a big part of my show. I would at least try to do that. I have done. I do have a lot of experience doing sort of celebrity interviews. Before I did Comic Tropes, I podcasted for like 7 years. It was a show called Television Zombies, and we would just discuss genre television, mostly sci-fi shows, stuff like, I don't know, Lost or Battlestar Galactica, Game of Thrones, I don't know, Supernatural, X-Files, anything like that was on at the time. And I would make it a point to interview a celebrity every week for that. I would reach out to publicists. I interviewed Stan Lee, George R.R. Martin, and all sorts of like writers and actors in various TV shows. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed doing celebrity interviews. So I would love to do that in comic books and dig deep. I mean, you know what kind of a show I do. I like to, not just say like, what's your favorite comic or what inspires you. I would, try to like really dig deep. Like, when did you decide that this could become a viable career? Or, do you have a take on how to write a character like Doctor Strange? I would just like ask random questions and try to dig deep into like what motivates people. What are my thoughts on the G.I. Joe animated movie from the 80s? I love it, but it's also kind of bad, if that makes sense. I've seen it so many times, I could probably like recite the whole thing. Yeah. How often do I go to cons, asks Sigamigs. You could do interviews with the artists there. You could, and I have, but it's hard. At conventions, artists' time is, very valuable. Like they're getting pulled in a million different directions. So they're being asked to do a signing for Marvel, and then go back to their table, and then go to a panel, and then they have to plug something, so they're getting interviewed by the Sci-Fi Channel, So it can be very tough to coordinate interviews with people at Comic-Cons. And I say that having done it. Like I said, when I did my podcast, I remember interviewing all sorts of people at the New York Comic Con, and it was exhausting. It was really exhausting. It was fun and interesting, but you can really only it was mostly panel opportunities as compared to one-on-one. Be better to try to organize some one-on-one time outside of that. Do you remember how comics in general dealt with 9/11? I do. I remember I was starting to become good friends with Robert Kirkman and Tony Moore at that point, and I remember their, I think, just 2-page story in the 9/11 anthology, the main one that every comic book artist contributed to. I remember that very clearly for some reason. What black and white comics do you favor, if any? Definitely the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles stuff from the 80s. Loved that. That was some of the first black and white comics I ever got into. Around the same time, The Tick. I find the original issues by Ben Edlund hilarious. There was some later stuff by Benito Cereno that's really funny. As far as black and white comics, there's a lot of manga is black and white, so My Hero Academia, anything by Naoki Urasawa, like Pluto or 20th Century Boys or Monster. Yeah, I love black and white comics. A lot of Walking Dead I love. Melody and Papa Bear says, wait, you were friends with Tony Moore? Yeah, go back and watch episode 100. I have him do the intro for that episode. Does your wife help come up with comedy routines for the videos? No, not really. Interesting question. It's fiance, by the way, but yeah, will be wife, so just as good. She's helped me plenty of times in my videos. Sometimes I need somebody to hold a camera or help me in some way. But generally, I tend to write most of the stuff myself. I don't really bounce much of that off of anybody. There is some behind-the-scenes stuff that I will sometimes bounce off of her. I will consult with, I don't know if he's still in the chat room, but Hooded Cobra Commander 788. I met him online pretty early on when I was doing the show. He actually won a giveaway on this show, and I started talking to him, and he'd been doing this a little bit longer, and I find him an invaluable resource because he's also a YouTuber that does reviews of something kind of nerdy, so those are some of the people. And then I've got a couple nerdy friends that sometimes I'll bounce a joke or idea off. I'm like, does this sound funny? Oh, thank you, J Muse. Are you a fan of Sam Keith's artwork? Thanks. Yeah, there's a lot of Sam Keith's artwork that I liked. Of course, the Max is really cool. I liked his work on was it Sandman? Sandman, yeah. Before that, he worked on Sandman. That was pretty cool. I'm trying to think of what he did after the Max, though. I feel like I just haven't seen him too much in the last decade or so. I'll have to do some research. That's that could definitely be an interesting creator to discuss. I'll have to do some research and see why I feel like I haven't seen too much by him. I'm sure he's still working, but I feel like I haven't seen a lot by him lately. Interesting question. Let's see. Melody and Papa Bear says, as regards copyright, what's the rules to having character names that already exist? Like Marvel has a Grizzly. Can I use the name if it's not the title? Probably. I would just check. Yeah, Grizzly, I don't think you can trademark or copyright. Well, you could probably trademark. You could trademark the logo, right? And you could register something like Marvel's The Grizzly, but you can't copyright just the name The Grizzly. That's just common. So, but that's just my loose 2 cents. Definitely talk to a lawyer if you have any concerns. Oh, Brian A says, I just found a cover he did for Apple Comics. That must be talking about Sam Keith still, right? Is it just me or is the audio a bit low? It is. Sorry, Nerdbane. There was a whole to-do with getting this live stream started. I was trying to live stream drawing, and I couldn't get my OBS to pick up my audio. So I am currently just doing a Q&A live stream, and I'm using my phone for it, and the microphone is on the other side of the phone. The good camera lens that's pointed at me is the good camera, but the microphone is on the other side. So it is a little low. You have to boost it up. Sorry. Not not an ideal setup, to be honest. I just thought I'd at least spend some time talking to everybody. I would not say that I'm excited for the HBO Watchmen series, Philip Flores. No, I think that Watchmen stands very well on its own. I'm not especially interested in exploring those characters in any further detail. I felt like there was a complete story that was told, and I didn't have any real interest in, what was it, the comic series before Watchmen. I didn't have any interest in whatever the current maxi series is about Watchmen. I'm just, just not much interest, to be honest. I feel like it was a complete story. It's the same way as something like the movie Highlander. It's not a great movie, but it's pretty good. It's entertaining, and I feel like it tells its whole story. So I've never really had much interest in any of those sequels. There's just not much more that I'm interested in hearing about. Have I heard about the Image Comics anthology about the Las Vegas shooting? Yeah, I've definitely seen that. I haven't read it. But that's definitely a common thing. Whenever there's a tragedy, the devastation in Puerto Rico, 9/11, the shooting in Las Vegas, a lot of times when that happens, there will be something that the comics industry puts together. They will often put together an anthology designed as a benefit book. I know that they did them for Hurricane Katrina for New Orleans. It's something I really love about the comics industry. I think that in general, a lot of the creators are very caring individuals that are willing to donate some of their time and work if it can help with relief efforts somewhere. And I appreciate how often that actually happens. Thoughts on Barry Windsor Smith? He's fantastic. He's brilliant. Conan is cool by Barry Windsor Smith, but I really, really like Marvel Comics Presents Weapon X. That probably ended up ultimately being my favorite thing by him. Karen G says Highlander and Queen equals love. Totally agree. Huge fan of Queen, so the music in that was awesome. I like the Highlander show and cartoon, says Milosh. Yeah, I guess when you're just sort of rebooting it completely and just saying all right, let's not pay too close attention to how the movie ended. Just deal with the premise of immortals out there with swords. That's fine. But I still don't think any of the movie sequels are any good at all. Let's see. Aside from Robert Kirkman, have you met other famous creators before they were famous? Yeah. I mean, there's so many artists that I know and so many writers that I know, and it's how do I define famous though, I could start listing the people that I know, and then if I either leave somebody out or if I include someone that you don't think is famous, I'm just saying yeah, I know a lot of people, but then again, the thing about the comic book industry is it's kind of small, alright? So it's not a surprise when some of us know each other. I know Jason Latour decently, enough to say hello to him at conventions, or Kerry Randolph. I know those guys really well. I know who, I don't know. I'm not trying to name drop. I'm just trying to think of people that I sort of know, but they're not people that I necessarily call up on the phone to say hello. It's more just we like each other's posts or reply with a joke in social media, and we'll say hello in person at conventions. Rafer Roberts. Rafer Roberts is somebody that I was really good friends with in DC, and these days he's writing for Valiant and I think Dark Horse and stuff like that. So that, yeah, I know plenty of people like that, but most people that work in comics know each other. Your camera looks nice and clear and sharp. Is it a new setup? No, this is an iPhone. That's all it is. So thank Apple for that. I am just streaming through my Apple iPhone right now. How often do you change the comics in your spinner rack? I haven't changed them at all yet. I've just sort of randomly moved them around and rotated this. I need to put a bunch more comics in here so that it can look fresh. I don't have a lot of comics anymore. I sold most of mine a few years ago. How many comics do I own? Asks Shoddy Workmanship. You usually show yourself buying a copy of the comic you're reviewing. Yeah, actually I don't tend to do that as often anymore. I loved sort of showing different comic book stores and that aspect of digging through back issues or something to find something. But eventually I just felt like it was getting a little repetitive. I love the idea of getting outside of my set, just to give it a little room to breathe. So if I go somewhere like a different city, that has a nice big comic book store, I'll try to do that just to like give a little bit of variety. But I don't do it every episode, and I don't own that many comics. Probably less than 1,000 these days. I used to have 30 long boxes, but a little over 4 years ago, I moved across the country for a job and I sold them all. I have not checked out the Batman Beyond comics, Nathaniel. Sorry. How much do you know about comics world history? I would like to know more about older Japanese and European comics. I definitely study it a lot, so there is more that I would love to talk about how those comic book industries evolved and formed, but I also still have a lot to say about how the American comics formed. I would love to talk about like printing over here, but I would like to talk about sort of post-war 1950s Japan when they started creating a lot more manga. I would love to talk about comics from Europe, see how far back I can go there. I'm sure that they've been around forever, but like it was really around the 60s that I started noticing comics from Europe and England and Belgium and so on. Why do you like to travel? A little unusual for a comic book fan. Is it? I don't know, I just love exploring. If I was wealthy, I would just want to spend my days reading stories and traveling the world. I just love finding new cultures, learning about human history and just how things have changed and maybe seeing where things could go. Trying new foods, just doing a little shopping, finding stuff that's different. I love traveling. I don't know, it's just my favorite thing. And let's see, you caught me while I was intros are like the Yacht Rock intros. Is that the reference, or is it from something else? Great question, Jojo. It's absolutely a reference to Yacht Rock. I wish more people knew about Yacht Rock. Yacht Rock was just one of the funniest online shows I've ever seen, and I've rewatched it many, many times. Do you think you can talk more about 2000 AD, asks Michael Chavis. Probably, yeah. I'm giving quite a bit of thought to what I could discuss for specifically Brian Boland. And so I would probably talk some about his work on Judge Dredd and what he did there in 2000 AD. But I would also love to just give an overall history someday about 2000 AD. That would be cool. Do you read fiction prose also? If so, book recommendations. Yes, but I haven't read a lot lately. I'm trying to think, like, what have I read lately? I mean, some Stephen King, like whatever his last book for the Dark Tower series was called. I read that. I like that. I read the Game of Thrones books, but that hasn't been like one for like 10 years, so forget that. What else have I read recently? I'd have to pull up my Kindle. I don't know. This is terrible. Like I do read a lot. Nothing's coming to me right now. I love The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. If you like comic books, you should read Michael Chabon's The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. It's a fantastic look at the comics industry in the 30s and 40s. Fantastic. Alright, see ya, Tomicus. I'll probably be taking off pretty soon too, folks. Let's see. Yeah, it's been about an hour, so I probably need to get going pretty soon, but I'll answer a few more questions. Let's see, what time is it? Okay, it's like 7:10. I'm leaving at like less than an hour. I'm leaving to go see that Nicolas Cage movie, Mandy. I've heard good things. We'll see. We'll see. I like horror, so I'm hopeful. Let's see. Some guy says, as a Finn, I love your videos that deal with the history of European, Japanese, or Chinese comics. There really aren't too many comics YouTubers who do stuff outside of American superhero comics. Yeah, I definitely want to cover the entire breadth of what I consider comics, which absolutely includes foreign comics and indie comics and stuff like that, and it's tough. You could do just European comics every week, and I think it would be a little tougher to grow the channel really big. It would take a little while, is all I'm saying. So I try to mix it all up, honestly. And some of my episodes probably aren't for everyone, but I like to think that, like, okay, somebody's like, oh, he's got something to say about Civil War II or Greg Land. Rob Liefeld. I'll watch some more of this guy's stuff. And maybe they discover Mobius for the first time, or maybe they're like, oh yeah, I've heard good things about Mobius. I remember reading like one heavy metal story. Maybe I should check more out. I like to hope that every once in a while that happens, and that, like, we talk to each other, and people shout suggestions in these live streams, so it's expanding like what I'm reading, and hopefully I'm helping expand what you read. Fingers crossed. I missed a bunch of stuff. Okay. Oh, good. Milos says that Mandy is very Lynchian. I'm a huge fan of David Lynch, so that would work for me. Fingers crossed. Gnarlston News says, I checked out Gru thanks to you. That's amazing to hear. That's amazing. Karen G says, Deep Secret takes place in between dimensions and in an 80s fantasy convention. Homeward Bounders is about these shady beings who control different Earths like playing a board game. Wow. Those both sound like good ideas. You know what, Karen G, in fact, this is a perfect example. Karen G was somebody that would show up in my live streams, and I remember she mentioned a few times My Hero Academia. And other people did too, but I just remembered that she mentioned it several times. And so I checked it out, and I love that book. That just totally speaks to me for some reason. So that's an instance where you guys are expanding what I'm reading. Hopefully it goes both ways. Okay, you guys are talking about somebody, Diana Wynne Jones. I'm not sure who that is. I'll try to remember that. Diana Wynne Jones. I'll look that up later. What are my favorite couples in comics, asks Milos. Mine are Big Bard and Scott Free, Hulkling and Wiccan, and Rogue and Gambit. Those are all fantastic couples. When it's written well, I do love Superman and Lois Lane, and I love Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson. But that's because that's sort of the big couples that were together when I was growing up. And so, I think whatever you read when you're first getting introduced to comics can make a bigger impact on you. Sometimes I really like Green Arrow and Black Canary. I like that as a couple. So yeah. Have I checked out the $1 True Believers comics? One or two of them. Let's see here. This is funny that I've got so much. Yeah, like for instance, someday I'm going to talk about Resurrection in comics, how it really actually wasn't much of a thing prior to this. So yeah, True Believers. I think that's a decent idea to get readers to learn about some big moments in the past. I think that Marvel has a good idea there. Excuse me. Nose is itchy. Any hobbies other than travel and comics? Drawing, hiking. Big hobbies? No, not really. No, I don't have enough time for, like, I've always sort of been of the opinion that, like, you can usually only have one big creative pursuit and then maybe a secondary one that you can pursue a little bit. But if you have too many hobbies or pursuits, you're going to just dilute everything. So my big focus these days is in creating comic tropes. That's where a lot of my time goes. And if I have much time beyond that, it's usually just to draw for fun. I do like playing video games. That's fallen a lot by the wayside. I don't have a lot of time for that right now. I collect a few things. I collect Hot Toys versions of the Marvel Universe, Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I've got some of those. Like just from here I can see Doctor Strange, Drax the Destroyer, and Yondu. But most of them are downstairs in the basement. Do I like the Punisher? Yeah. Yeah. I liked him when I was a kid. You know what? I like the early 80s stuff. It's fine. I think Punisher works best as a foil, not an antagonist per se, but at least a foil for Daredevil and Spider-Man. I think that's where he works best as compared to supporting his own series long term. Most of the good Punisher stories that you'll remember aren't necessarily about Frank Castle. They tend to be more about like weird, quirky villains and the way he destroys them. There's not a lot that like focuses on that. Oh yeah. Hooded Cobra Commander says you got that Reagan's Raiders comic. This is something that Hoodie Coco himself found in a comic store and he picked up for me. This is a weird comic. It was by Solson Publications. This guy, Saul Brodsky, was the son of, I forget his father's name, but it was also Brodsky. And Brodsky was the like print production manager at Marvel Comics, big important position, and his son tried to do like a small indie press. They made some really terrible comics, honestly, some really bad ones. They've got a few good artists and stuff, no question, but they made some pretty bad comics. They got the license somehow to do Ninja Turtles training manuals, back like when Ninja Turtles were still very, very new. So Mirage Comics was printing all the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stuff. There wasn't even like an Archie version based on a cartoon or anything yet. And Solson Productions produced one comic for each of the Ninja Turtles teaching you how to do like Kung Fu and use their weapons, but they're bad. Oh wow, okay, got a super chat from Nerdbane, so let's read this. Have you ever read the edgy 90s TMNT Image comic series? It's pretty interesting. Yes, I have. For me, it was like trying a little too hard to be dark. Let's see, like Donatello got turned into like a cyborg because he was so beaten up. I think Raphael got half his face burned off by acid, so he like had like this weird mask. It was dark. It was really dark. It wasn't bad. It was just very different because the only thing up to then was really like the live action original movies and the 9-year-old like cartoon, that original cartoon. So it was sort of trying to harken back to the original Ninja Turtle comics, which were way edgier, but I feel like they sort of lost some of the satire. Anyway, I guess IDW has decided to let Frank Frosco, who worked on those 90s comics, wrap up his story. So they're gonna print those. All right. Do you think comics will ever be mass consumed again? Probably. I do think so. And I think the only question is someday somebody's going to figure out a distribution method and some relevant characters that people are into. I do think that, like, because the format, the idea of panel-to-panel drawings, people will be able to make that, like, make their own stories that way always. So yeah, I do think that someday it will be mass consumed again. Didn't one of the turtles become the Shredder or lead the Foot Clan? I think Leonardo got brainwashed. It's hard to remember now, because that was like 20 years ago now. But yeah. Alright, good night. Thank you very much for watching. Let's see, this is Zuka. I probably mispronounced your name, but I gave it a shot. Thank you so much for coming in. Folks, I'm probably going to wrap up now, so unless you have any burning questions, I just want to sincerely thank you all for stopping in and talking to me. I remember a character named Cerebus as a 90s kid. Is he still around? Nope, that was planned to be 300 issues. They hit 300 issues in the early 2000s, they being basically Dave Sim, the creator, and he also worked with a background artist, Gerard. Anyway. Thank you very much for that super chat, J Muse. Very kind of you. Very kind of you. Yes, Beast, have some grilled cheese. How many burritos can C.B. Cebulski eat? I'm not sure if that's a reference to something. Really not. Sorry. Any bad comics you like anyway? I like all sorts of comics. Like, some of these might classify as bad, but I still like them. I'm trying to look. You know, like, at least as a kid, I don't know that Spawn was ever necessarily great, but I liked it. What else? What else here is bad? I don't know. Maybe these aren't bad comics, actually. These are just sort of weird comics. Yeah, so most of these are just weird, and there's some actually really good ones in here. But, yeah, I don't know. Well, I know an okay example. Okay, so where is it? Where is it? It's very specific. Where did I put it? Okay, here it is. Comics that are made. This is published by DC, but it was made by RadioShack to promote their computers, right? Any comic like that that's basically trying to push some sort of a product, like Combo Man, I reviewed him, Combo Man. Those are pretty bad comics, but I like them. I like them because they're so weird. Those are my guilty pleasures. Anyway, Edward Lightbringer says a guilty pleasure comic he likes is Cave Woman by Bud Root. Sure. Spawn is great, man. What do you mean? Like I say, your mileage may vary. That's all. Anyway, what do you think of the event sequel trend? Civil War II, World War Hulk II, etc. I'm burned out on events, man. I would love events to just take a complete break, and it would just make crossing over in a title so much more special. It's like these superheroes all hang out in like some gigantic mansion together all the time. How would you make Jimmy Olsen relevant? Just sort of make him the protagonist and give him like a modern day media job. Maybe he's a White House correspondent, and you make a sort of a soap opera drama, like where maybe he's an embedded reporter though, or maybe he's an embedded reporter with like the military, and he goes on like missions with like a crack unit like Sergeant Rock's Easy Company, you know, something like that. There's lots of ways you could do it. Anyway, I know I missed a bunch. Shoddy Workmanship asks if I've ever read any doujinshi or any self-published stuff. Not Japanese, plenty of self-published stuff. I love going to Small Press Expo. I love going to Artist Alley in comic book conventions and trying new things all the time. But I'm going to take off now. And yeah, it was wonderful talking to all of you. Sorry I don't have a great setup. I'm going to get that fixed by October. So that means in October, I'm going to live stream every day. A lot of those days are going to be after I come home from work. That means I'm not going to start until 10 p.m. Pacific. Very late for most of the country. Maybe I'll have a few international viewers that are up. Don't expect a lot of people at those times. There'll be some days where I'm not working and I can do it at a more reasonable hour. I'll try to aim for something more like 6 p.m. Pacific. But anyway, I am currently aiming to live stream for an hour a day throughout every single day in October. So, wish me luck. Got to work on that setup now. I'm going to get ready to go out to the movies. Thanks, everybody. I had a great time. Bye. How do I stop it? How do I stop it?